would like to introduce Pauline McKinnon to you, who is the founder of Stillness-based Therapy Center. She's doing this work for last more than 40 years, I believe. Isn't it, Pauline?
Correct, over 40 years.
Okay. So can you just tell me what this means, stillness-based therapy?
It's Dr Ainslie Mears' method that I specialise in. He was a life transformer for me, and you say, what is it? It's a very simple and natural kind of meditation. Maybe it's not even meditation, maybe it's simply learning to really explore effortlessly, explore and experience effortlessly the inner strength and calmness that we all have within us, but that we lose through trying, through striving, through tension, through distractions in life and so on. So the equanimity is lost, and then people get distressed for various reasons.
Okay.
So this is about simplicity.
So is it a technique?
Well,
or is it a teaching?
It's a teaching. Dr. Mears wouldn't call it a technique because he felt that puts a logical connotation on it, whereas it's really not logical. It's about simply being still. And it's a little different to other styles of meditation. In fact,
can you explain us, Pauline, a bit more in detail? Like what exactly it involves? Does it involve few sessions with you, or do you give them a manual or something to read through, or to practice something?
Well, most people who come here have read one of my books, if not several.
Yep.
But the idea is that I meet with each person individually before we begin, so that we get to know each other a little bit, so I understand individual needs and expectations, and so that people make that connection with me and feel that they understand where I'm coming from, and also it gives me the opportunity to really explain this and to explain the procedure. Then hopefully the individual will join a group. Sometimes I work one-to-one with people. Some people prefer that. They feel that they don't want the group environment. But the group environment in this case is very private. There's no conversation or interaction within the room. People simply come, sit quietly, and at the end of the session I call them out from the room. Then we have a little chat with each person just to keep that connection, the friendly connection going, encouraging them to practice this at home and to really be aware of that stillness developing or being reconnected within their life.
So do you think if a person comes to this session for the first time, he will have some taste or experience of this stillness with you?
I always give each person a little taste of stillness, yes. After we've had our first conversation, we go down to the meditation room, to the quiet place, and we have a little session just to give them that inkling. One of the special features of this teaching is the use of calming touch by the therapist. So in concert with the meditation experience, I move around from person to person, just placing my hands gently on the chest and shoulder area and possibly across the forehead and the top of the head. Most people are quite comfortable with that. Some people are a little hesitant, but once people taste it and experience it, we get amazing feedback from the touch, because it's such a powerful human connection, so much more than words, and quite unique to Dr. Mears' ideas, because he believed words just get in the way of capturing ease of mind.
Very true. And can we talk a bit more about Dr. Ainslie Mears, his background and what he did and when he did?
Yes, well, Dr. Mears was a psychiatrist, but he began life actually as an agricultural scientist.
Oh, really?
Which is interesting, because it kind of brings the two parts into the whole, doesn't it, you know? Anyway, he chose to study medicine, and he was sent as a young doctor to look after what was then known as the shell-shocked soldiers after the Second World War. We would call them now sufferers of PTSD. I think he found it very frustrating that he didn't have the tools, the medical tools, to help in these kind of conditions. And so at that time he began to experiment with the use of hypnosis, because that was just sort of beginning to be seen as a potential medical or healing tool. He was quite taken by that, and he ultimately became an expert in clinical hypnosis, world-renowned, and he wrote many books and papers on that topic. In the process of his work with patients using hypnosis, I've jumped ahead a little bit.
Yep.
He subsequently became a psychiatrist. So then he began working with people with pain and with other ailments, illnesses, and as well as of the mind. He found that he was helping people to relax into the hypnotherapy, you might say, but the therapy part of it, he believed, became irrelevant, because it was the way he was getting them to relax that was making a difference. People were getting well again without coming to any logical conclusions via the hypnotherapy. So, this is a long story. Do you want me to continue?
No, yeah, continue, because it's very, very important to understand where this teaching is coming from, who was the pioneer of this teaching. And can I ask you, Dr. Mears learned it from someone else?
Well, essentially he began this journey through his own experiments and experience. But he was quite an avid traveller, it seems, and he went to many places. There's a little book of his titled Strange Places, Simple Truths, which covers a lot of those travels in very rare places, India included. And at one point in his travels, he found himself in Nepal, at Kathmandu. And as he states, I think within that book, Kathmandu was not a tourist area in those times. It was very difficult to get there. And that's when he met the Shiva Puri Baba, who at that time was 134 years of age.
Okay.
He spoke English, and he had travelled widely, of course, because he'd had many years to travel. And Mears came across him, and really they just more or less sat together for long periods of time. And what Dr. Mears started to notice, as he records in his books, that he began to feel calmer, because he was sitting with this man who practiced stillness for some 16 hours a day. And
for 130 years, maybe.
Well, that's right. He'd have it well honed. So this inspired him, and he took that message, I suppose you could say, brought it back to Australia, and kind of, the way I see it, he sort of married it up with the conclusions he'd come to. And so out of that became his approach to meditation. Now, he called it a mental ataraxis, meaning ataraxis being a Greek word which roughly means absence of disturbance. So that's absence of disturbance in the mind. At one stage he also, or originally he referred to this as atavistic regression. Atavistic meaning basic human, ancient human response. So regression to that atavistic or more primitive self.
Yep.
So that was the most important, I think, component of his work. This natural ability for human beings to capture stillness, but we get programmed out of it if it's not established and validated early in life.
So let's talk about the method which he taught people and you learned from him. When you practice it to people, do they have to keep practicing every day, or once they are established then they don't have to practice anything?
I think we always have to practice meditation. It's like, it's more important than anything, really. It's like breathing, isn't it? Second to breathing if we're doing it well. I think it's really important that it's practiced regularly, because otherwise the brain will revert back to its old habits. The brain won't understand that there's a necessary change to take place.
So Pauline, how many hours a day a person has to practice this method?
Well, Dr. Mears used to say 10 minutes morning, 10 minutes evening was perfectly fine. I think that depends on the individual. I think if someone is really struggling, I think we need longer periods. And I must say also, later in his career, Dr. Mears worked with cancer patients, and he had this, he put forward this theory that his style of meditation might have the capacity to actually arrest cancer. So he was very adamant, really, that long periods of meditation must be observed in order to have such a dramatic effect. Mm-hmm. So that's something that's an area that hasn't been explored fully.
But Pauline, during his time when he was exploring these techniques on cancer patients, were there any improvements in patients, or do you know anything about what he did with cancer patients?
Well, only what I've read, really, and what I've heard him speak on, and he definitely saw a number of effective remissions. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in his writings, he's categorized from anecdotal research. I think the most significant and memorable of all that was that whether people actually found remission, you know, were fortunate enough to move into remission, or in fact whether they were facing death, people reported feeling more at peace, more at ease, more joyful, happier, more content, as though another level of living had been opened up and experienced. Yeah.
So whatever was the outcome of the cancer, but people were more contented and happy
within themselves.
Oh,
yes,
that's a good end, I believe. You know,
I think it is a good end, because we all have to die of something, don't we, one day? Yeah. And I think this whole idea of being at peace is what human nature needs, maybe more than anything.